Hey, hello everyone who is watching this, wherever you are. This is Mihai Algiu, and this is my honorable guest, Scott Killaby. And basically, this is in a series of that I'm doing of interviews and podcasts on the topic of non-duality, psychotherapy and non-duality. And the purpose of this is to explore the necessity of doing both spiritual awakening work. Some of us who are watching this are probably already interested in meditation, witnessing, Ramana Maharishi, self-inquiry. So the necessity of combining this consciousness exploration, presence, abiding as presence, coming back to presence, combining that with subconscious work, meaning uncovering all the childhood stuff and all the traumas and the deficiency stories, and in a safe way, skillfully to kind of process them. And somehow myself, and I will give the floor to Scott very soon, but myself, I work as a somatic psychotherapist, AMFT, and at the same time I've been on a spiritual path for a very long time, and I have verified that actually what Scott is saying almost every day, 2 or 3 times a day in his Facebook lives, and is absolutely true on myself and also the people I work with. And I felt like that you are somehow hidden, Scott, and it's like without, you know, yeah, it's a gem. And I'm, I must say I've never, this is the first time I meet you. We never talked before. And just by getting the not even the books, your Facebook and your YouTube, I could really benefit profoundly applying these teachings on myself. And I found that it's more efficient. I started to incorporate working with clients and working with groups. So I'm really honored to finally meet with you. And I once even had a dream that we met in a dream, and then we had a great conversation. It worked out well. It was
Wow.
so satisfying that I didn't think of reach out
I
to
didn't
you.
really need to meet me
Yeah,
after
I
that
didn't
because you already
even
met me.
meet you. Yeah, I was like, oh my God, we met. So for those of you who don't know Scott Killaby, so he's a spiritual teacher, and at the same time, he has opened a few recovery centers and addiction trauma processing center from awareness, from mindfulness, and is the author of 5 or 6, 7 books. And at the same time, he's I could see that after some time doing more like the non-dual scene and teaching, you realize that you need to pull back and you needed to address some of your own subconscious imprints. And having faced them, you realize probably, oh my God, everybody has this, and just presence work is not going to cut it. And then you came up with this great discoveries. Was actually the East discovered them already, and the science is discovering them now. That this trauma is lives in the body, and the body keeps the score. Talk therapy doesn't quite work so well. I mean, with all the respect, it works to talk to someone rather than not talk to someone. But in terms of eradicating these things, it doesn't work. And also, you came up with a beautiful and efficient system of recovery from addiction that I would like you to talk about, but still using witnessing and using awareness, and without fighting the actual addiction, but exploring the drivers that the pain that we are trying to manage. So we don't fight that what we manage, but we try to explore and loosen up the pain.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I would like to welcome you, Scott. And maybe I can start with a question here. How
Well,
was
thanks
the,
for having me, first of all.
yes, yes. Um, can you talk a little bit about your process of somehow uh, having some deeply liberating insights about the nature of what we are and presence, and somehow feeling somehow that it is done? And how did you what happened, what your insights, realizing that no, that's actually just the beginning and there's stuff to uncover now?
Yeah, it was exactly like that because I had, the non-dual realization, and it wasn't just a peak experience. It felt like it had shifted. But then, and so I think a lot of people feel that way because it can be a very powerful, liberating experience. And so the mind could easily come in and say, well, I'm done. But an experience is what I watched. I watched my experience rather than what my mind was saying. And my experience was that right after the awakening, I started a 3-year sexual compulsion that really hadn't been there before.
Mm.
So it's like, well, where is this coming from? And why is it happening? And that was the first thing. And then so through that, there was a lot of shame, frankly,
Mm.
because it's like, here I am, I've just come out and I've put these books out here. And then here I have this, why is this happening to me? Well, I dealt with a lot of it on my own because I didn't have anybody with me that could actually, when you're doing that kind of thing, you don't really have a facilitator or a teacher that comes with you during these sexual escapades. So I had to learn how to go deeper into my own experience and find out what was driving it. And that was my first foray into what we now call a new model of recovery, or a new model. It's probably more than one, where I focused on the drivers. So for me, it was like you said, shame, trauma, and deficiency stories. And then as I found that, I noticed that as I would inquire into those drivers, the compulsivity would come down. Every time I would inquire into the compulsivity would come down. And the more that I look at it, it's like there was a trajectory, like the whole compulsion itself was slowly falling away. And I was like, well, there's something here. I mean, what's happening? This is good. And so I kind of stored that information and didn't do much with it. And then later on, the second big thing was that, as you probably have heard me talk about, very serious chronic pain as a result of repressed anger. And so that was another wake up call to, first of all, think that I have this physical issue, and come to find out as I take inquiry to it, old rage,
Mm.
old trauma that was surprising to see. But I'm so glad that I did it, because in pulling that up and processing that, then the pain went away. So it's like, okay, we're onto something here. There's something here that we can work with. And so then we then developed it more, and that eventually led to the Kilby inquiries, which are the inquiries that we do these days. And by the way, I have a co-developer. I want to make sure that he gets credit for that, Dan McClintock, because he and I really co-developed this. And then we also then created something independent of that called a new model of recovery, which we can talk about that, where we deal with the driver. So yeah, I guess that's the short version. But yeah, I don't, it's what's so great now is I don't have any desire to think of myself as done. And that's been liberating, because
Yeah,
at first you think, if I'm done, that's liberating. But that's just another kind of belief that we don't need. And then as that falls away, it's, it
it's a
just feels
limiting
different.
belief.
Yes, it's a limiting belief. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. um, hmm. Yeah, actually, so many things I want to ask you and go into, but we'll just take one by one.
Mhm.
uh, I really appreciate, and you modeled for me something that is not um, doesn't happen so much in the non-dual scene or in the scene of enlightened people, is that you are real and authentic, and you are sharing your business, rather than keep a facade of
Mhm.
holy and peacefulness and all that.
Mhm.
And actually, yeah, because often we get the spiritual teacher on a special pillow, or on a special throne, or even if it's just a regular, still they are not disclosing, and they are focusing on pointing to awareness. And somehow I really appreciated that you make yourself vulnerable, so to say, and you share about your subconscious little me stories. And actually it's very empowering. And it's like, oh man, if Scott Kilby is messed up, then he was messed up. It's okay. I'm messed up too, you know. And I'm doing groups. I found out that the best way the group works is that I submit myself through the process and share a little bit, not just to take space about me, but to share. Then in this way, I'm less on a pedestal and it's more helpful, modeling the work,
Yes. Well, can I share I think the main reason? Well, there's two reasons why I feel like I can be transparent now. One is by going so deep into shame.
Mm.
So that was the big thing, because with my addiction, I had to come face to face with all the layers of shame. And so when those kind of have worked through, it's like, okay, there's nothing stopping me from now just sharing, because before it's like I have to hide behind this, like you say, kind of a facade. And
Yeah.
the other thing that helped me is when I went through the chronic pain and recognized that it was anger repression, I was like, how did that happen? And then I looked at, oh, I know how it happened, because I was looking at all these teachers who put on whether it was authentic or not, the facade of complete peacefulness, almost sainthood. And it's like, those were the models. And so they were modeling, right? If there was anger there, they weren't sharing about it. So it's just assumed that there is no anger there. You're constantly just abiding in this peace. And then that instilled in me somehow along the path that anger is bad, or it's not part of enlightenment. And if you feel it, dismiss it or whatever. So I can't then come out here and say, or be that person anymore, like just sits here for other people and doesn't share honestly, because I don't know who else is looking at me thinking, you're being deceptive, or you are actually portraying this in a way that isn't as healthy as it could be, So there's peace, there's anger, there's everything in my life. And that's what feels alive. That's what feels like I don't have to be anything. I don't have to be in a box. I could just be how I am, how I show up at any moment.
And this is what they say in these deep teachings, this embodiment. So the first step, let's say, oh, I'm the witness. I'm not these thoughts, these stories. I'm not this stuff. But that can be kind of remove one from life and stay in some kind of fake peace. And actually, they say the next step is to go back to one's life and all aspects to be there will be the celebration rather than a cautious, detached witnessing,
Very much so. And I think it has to do somewhat, as you know, since you work in this field, is that as we come down, as you say, and meet some of these things that are buried in our body, then we don't have to detach as much. Because one of the reasons we were detaching or being the witness so fervently is because we weren't willing or able to come down in. But I think as soon as people start to come down in, not everyone, then they'll start to lose that stuck in emptiness sense, because somehow that brings them into it.
So coming back to what you said, from what I understood your story and your shares, so this pattern of repressing anger was initially coming from a family of origins. And I'm not talking necessarily about you, but about all of us. Certain patterns of, let's say, hiding, lying, staying small, being very cute and getting straight A's, whatever. All these are like strategic adaptation to some unsafe emotional family environment. So it seems like in your case, and what was cool is that I share some of the same patterns. So I was like, yes, exactly like that. So it was safer in the family of origin to be a peacemaker and to make sure everybody's okay and all that. And on top of that, the spiritual program, which also I had, that hey, it's anger, it's not okay. And so then it will be pushed away and presence. And it seems like you paid a high price for that. It's a great gift actually, because I know you are teaching and doing groups and even working with doctors to not just to explore, but to tackle chronic pain in case there is any repressed psychological content.
Right. I almost paid the highest price because I was actually suicidal during some of that. So not only did I have experienced a lot of pain because of repressing anger, but it went to that place. And when it goes to that place where you're willing to kill yourself over the pain, when I come back to the teaching, there's a clear that I'm not, you can see that that's fundamentally changed how I see everything at this point. So, so I'm not going to come, so I want to come in and be transparent or authentic, or I don't want to do it, you know, because that's where that leads. And I'm like the poster child. I tell people, it's like, you can be on the spiritual path and not listen to me. You can do that. But look at what happened to me. You know, that's maybe the highest price you can pay, but there's a lot of other prices. And you mentioned it because now science is figuring out that repressing emotions can contribute to all sorts of physical issues and mental health issues. So it's going to be harder and harder for us in the non-dual world to not pay attention to this over time. I think eventually we're going to have to pay attention to it more.
Yeah, and actually I'm happy that, you know, I'm in these circles, and I would really like my fellow truth lovers and truth seekers to really be open to this, that it might be not enough to go to Vipassana and meditate all day, or even to be with a like wonderfully enlightened master and experience days of transparent abiding, and it's nothing is real and all that. Somehow they still might be necessary for many of us, if not all of us, in my humble clinical opinion. Somehow there are stuff, as you said, stuff is not coming up in the retreat. There are some buried, what you call these imprints, deficiency stories, which are not just stories. There is some sense of me in it, you know. So it's very much related to dismantling the separate sense of me, and we can't do it. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about this? Also, this concept of, I like it, in psychology they call it limiting beliefs or core material or this or that, but you coined this thing, deficiency, story, identity, which is a mixture of different stuff. Could you touch upon of that?
That also came from my experience, because after the awakening, for, you know, the one thing that's good about awakenings is that a lot of the conditioning can be seen through, like there's a lot of freedom, but also that, to me, that highlights the areas that where you're not. When you really experience a lot of freedom, you can really see those areas. And one of the areas was with my ex-husband, the way that we would interact with each other is he would come at me to do something, or that I didn't do something. And for some reason I kept feeling like a woundedness around it. It's like, well, he's just saying, like, can you do the dishes differently, or whatever he's saying. But it's like, why am I feeling that? And then I kept going back to, okay, if I just rest as what I am, that's fine. But it seems like there was something that was getting missed. Like you were saying, the unconscious or the subconscious. So then I sat down in my room one day and I pulled him up and I asked, okay, what deficiency story, the boomerang, what deficiency story? I already had that word in my vocabulary. I'd been thinking about it. What deficiency story comes up? And then what I got was I'm unlovable. And once I named it, it's like I had this like way in. I don't know. It just changed everything once I named it. And then I could do inquiry specifically on that around those triggers. So then I started taking it to other people, and people would say, yeah, it's not that I'm unlovable. It's like I'm not good enough, or some version of, I'm invalid, I'm powerless, I'm weak, I'm a victim, I'm black sheep. I'm not there yet. I'm not enlightened yet. I'm not, whatever the story is. So I started to see that it's fairly universal. That was nice. And you guys know this as clinicians. You're like, yeah, of course it is. We've known this for years. And I have a lot of friends who are therapists like you. So my therapist friends know about this thing. Like they know, they look at the enlightenment thing and they go, that's great, except for these things are being missed. Like they'll point it out. So we need voices like yours to speak up about that. And that's one of those areas, deficiency stories, that if we don't talk about it, self-limiting beliefs, if we don't talk about it specifically and maybe even inquire into it, we just bypass it. It continues on and we don't see what's going on.
Yeah. And I really found out that actually it's this deficiency stories are actually not special. They are universal. like the patterns of woundedness and all that. And actually, there are not so many. It's like 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 maximum flavors of ice cream, you know, unworthy, unlovable,
Yeah.
broken, something wrong with me, not enough, too much, something like that, or it's not
Yeah.
safe, I have to hide, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So actually being very much influenced by your work, I am now trying to, as soon as possible, have the client identify that, you know, and it's actually pretty easy to identify that if the client is a little bit aware and is following the scent, the trail of the contraction in the heart or in the belly. And so anyway, identifying it. Now, identifying it is not enough. It's necessary to kind of, because this, as you said, this deficiency story is not just a story, is a sense of me in it. What Ramana Maharishi will call the me feeling and the me thought as a separate me. And actually, it's thoughts and memories and layers of contracted pain from childhood. So it's very powerful. So it's necessary to be, I guess it's like a file to be defragmented. And I like your term, to shred the conditioning.
Yeah. I also want to remind that like a lot of the deep work that we do, and you probably know this as a therapist, is to really work with mom and dad, family of origin and early, because a lot of these deficiency stories, I mean, I don't know exactly where they start, but you can tell if you start to talk to people, as you know, is that it's because of how dad and I related that I felt that way. And so I think that's another thing that gets missed on the spiritual path, is like, it's not very popular to look at, kind of go back to mom and dad stuff,
Yeah,
right?
come on, leave the past. Come on, this happened and
Right.
all that. Yeah.
But at the same time, this is where a lot of it originates.
Yeah.
So the conditioning that's coming through in the present moment, if you'll go back, you can, those, your parents are like a doorway into that. You can, don't think of it as something bad. Like, this is good. Let's go back and see what you're still believing, you know. But I know that on the path, people say, be here now. Don't go to the past.
Yeah.
I have an issue with just that whole thing there. But
Yeah.
yeah, because everything arises here, including the past. And if we're shutting the past out, if we're repressing or dismissing that phenomena, that's still going to operate in our experience somehow. So why are we making this strong demarcation between presence, past, and future when they're all arising now? And the question is, what's unconscious, right? You mentioned it, like, what am I not aware of? And am I willing to go to that place of the stuff that's already here? It's not like we're going to the past, it's already here. Even if it's just repressed, it's still here,
Yes.
showing up as a contraction or a pain.
Yeah.
So to say be here now would be to ignore that that's actually going on.
Yes.
Yeah.
I liked recently you've been kind of questioning spiritual practices and having like, hey, what practice are you doing? And then somehow hearing you say some practices are pretty, and I kind of do the same working with people. Ask them, they say, you meditate? They say, yes. Well, what do you do or not do? And then they are going to tell me they do all kind of things that I feel like is not useful. And even what I heard you say, that even this fine practice, as you call it, of witnessing phenomena, they come, they go, the thought, the feeling, something, witnessing, resting in the here and now, like a good kind of Eckhart Tolle, Adyashanti combo. Somehow you said it's a fine practice because things come and go, appear, but there are some stuff that are not going to appear. And actually those are driving addiction. Those are driving all kind of stuff that sometimes they are snuffed. I used to do that, as you call it, like something comes and okay, it's just a thought. But there, you know, if you can speak about this, that yeah, some are just a thought and this just doesn't have any charge, no point to kind of dig there. But some actually one can bookmark for later and inquire into, open the file there.
Yeah, it reminds me, like, I think when I was on the path before I did some of the somatic work, is just coming back to awareness, like so many teachings tell you. And I was trying to reverse engineer, like, how did that anger repression happen through spirituality? I could see how it happened just being a human being, growing up as a peacemaker in your family, but how did this practice of allowing everything,
Mhm.
how could I miss all of that? And I was thinking, well, if I go back, what would happen is that if a trigger would start to arise, it's like, well, just kind of witness the thought before it takes root and takes shape. And
Mhm.
then, but in witnessing, what they're saying is kind of delete it
Mhm.
and refer back to being awareness. But then when you delete that, like what then can you not access in the body that's connected to?
Mhm.
So the very deletion of the thought or the pushing away is of just
Mhm.
a repression. And that's why now when I'm talking about practice, I'm always like you, I'm always looking to see it's fine that you're meditating and that you're being with what is, but what is it that's not arising that you're not aware of here that's still running your life and creating suffering? So that's where we try to take the work into those areas rather than just be here now and be
Yeah.
with what's arising.
Yeah. Hmm. And you mentioned, and I've been using this a lot, as you said, that deficiency story or the limiting, it doesn't come up in emptiness, but it's connected to some relation, first
Yeah.
relation, and so you have this the boomerang inquiry, which has so many benefits, and it can be very useful even for non-dual clients, just regular people. They don't want to have any awakening, but I'm triggered, and instead of attacking or collapsing, kind of just calm down. I'm not calm down, just witness what's happening. And then I do this with my girlfriend. Okay, I'm triggered. Okay, instead of being busy with her, what old story this brings up in me? And then wait, and then it comes from me. Oh, I cannot be myself. She wants to
Yeah.
change me or something. And that's why I am triggered, not because she said this or the dishes and that,
Right.
you know? So,
Yes.
yeah, I
Well, it just
really,
reminds me of when I'm working with couples sometimes, because you can really see it when you're working with couples. Because if they're arguing, they're like two people, it's like each one is focusing outward. And you can see that the conflict just continues and continues. And you can also see resistance to the boomerang for them,
yeah,
because once we get going, we want to,
yeah.
how that is. But then as soon as they turn towards it and they name it, like I'm not being heard, and then as soon as they go into inquiry around that, it just things start to clear up. Like insight comes. You
Yeah.
can see something that I was believing, wasn't willing to feel. Now I can feel it, allow it. And it just seems to help couples so much. But that's just a really good example of how, can I tell you one little story?
Please.
Is that the way that I started talking about that we need to bring relationship into inquiries, because I would work with people and these be people who would be sitting in their room and spend a lot of time in their room, or not all the time, but and then cultivating that experience of awareness and coming to me, kind of trying to convince me that they're already awakened, which is not, that's fine, but but my point is all I have to do is say, okay, so your awareness now, pull up your wife and then say, I'm lovable, and like, okay, so that showed me there that we don't need to be really doing inquiry in open air in space, because these triggers are happening in the context of relationships. So why aren't we working in that context when we're crying?
Yes, yes. And I love how you did recently some pretty nice video on the relationships are not made to make us happy. From Eckhart Tolle, they are made to make us conscious, and how to. This is very rare, actually, to use the relationship as an opportunity to free oneself from sense of separation. And because what I noticed, that for many couples, their deficiency stories and mommy daddy wound gets stirred, and on top of that there's no communication skills, and it gets attacking and violent communication. So then you are not even tackling the first issue. Now there's the second issue. So
Yeah.
sometimes may be necessary to have some non-violent communication skills just to have some safety to tackle the previous issue, that, oh, I feel unloved, I'm going to lose, whatever, I'm unworthy. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like it's emotionally honest, because if you've ever been in an argument or you've watched a conflict when you can tell that one person is very scared, or very shamed, but they're making about something else. See what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
instead of saying I'm ashamed, they're saying you did this, you did that, you did that. And it's like, well, we first of all, let's try to be emotionally honest. Let's connect with our bodies first to see what we're feeling first, rather than what we're thinking. And then as soon as they connect with that, it just feels like it's more honest. And it's also disarming, because if I have a fight with my husband or argument or whatever, if I'm angry in that moment and I'm making it about this, this, and this, and I'm not being honest, it's nice for me to come back later and say, you know, I don't think it really was about you. It was like old dad rage, frankly. And that's honest. And so that's disarming. And then, so, because also this is not just about freedom, like there's a deeper heart connection in these relationships. It's not just getting free. It's like you can come in with each other when you clear this stuff more easily or more openly. Like something really cool happens.
Yeah.
How to say that, but it's good that to
Mhm.
do this work in couples and really all relationships, I would think.
Yeah. Well, one thing I noticed, so for a long time I was snuffing thoughts away as soon as it comes, but
Mhm.
the mind was all time busy, and I was doing this for years.
Yeah.
And as soon as it arises, kind of come back to the present, and it was endless. So, but what I noticed actually after having met my current teacher Francis, Lucille, and somehow anyway, the point is that by also processing the deficiency stories and the traumas and all the unresolved stuff, the side effect of them is that one will have less thoughts, actually, because all of this pain body, energetic, gut level stuff
Mhm.
that they are repressed, they generate craving, wanting this or that all the time, and so yeah, so basically the mind can become quiet, not because I'm trying to quiet it with a constant
Yeah,
effort, but it's naturally quiet with the diminishing of what drives the craziness,
that's really good, because if people can really hear that, then that might help them not do that almost impossible practice. Like you can
Yeah,
keep coming back, but it's like at some point you got to give that up. It's like
yeah,
and it's also can be creates a strong oscillation between I got it, I lost it,
yeah,
like I'm thinking so I don't have it,
yeah,
and right. So, but as they come down into the body, and if you discover on your own that when you're aware in the body and you're inquiring or seeing the stories down there, once you see that when you do some inquiry, it actually does bring quietness. You don't then think that
yeah,
inquiry, you see it in
yes,
so you don't have to listen to me and you talking about it. They try it and you'll see. That's what I'm
yeah,
saying.
yeah. There's some
Yeah.
discharging. It comes memory and oh no, and feelings, and it's almost like the file that was ziplocked. It starts opening up memories, this feeling, sensation. If one is either with someone that you can witness it without trying to, so there's some
Mhm.
discharge. So this
Yes.
stuff are absorbed in the presence that we are, and then there'll be a natural quietness.
Yeah. Right. Because like if we're being triggered on an old trauma or something, that will tend to continue, as you know, or if we believe we're not good enough, we'll keep going to those places of triggers. So obviously if we start to clear it, then those places might not arise as much, right? Those areas. And
Yeah,
that's something that people may not think about when they think of inquiry, especially
yeah,
if they're in the practice of just coming back. They may not see the benefit of that until they understand the body piece. Like you say, body keeps the score,
yeah,
and it keeps the score for the mind, right?
yes,
It's like when your body is, when you're feeling something, repressing something or contracted, if you look, you'll notice that it's difficult to have a naturally quiet mind than that.
yeah,
You can do it, but it's much easier to have a naturally quiet mind when your body feels transparent or more transparent because you've done the deeper work down
yes,
there.
yes.
Yeah.
And you put something from a quote that was really true, that often when I think of PTSD and trauma, it's like, oh, there's disturbing memory of somebody blown to pieces or somebody raped me, which it can come like that and it is
Yeah.
disturbing. But these are more like explicit memory. The trauma actually shows up much more frequently as a reaction, reactivity, trigger. You know, there's no memory, just some shutting down or puffing up, or I think there was the quote saying that yeah, you put it on your Facebook, that trauma doesn't come as a memory, it comes as a reaction.
Right, which is a quote from someone else, but yeah, I feel that's accurate. And by the way, I think that might be one of the reasons why this stuff stays somewhat repressed, because if in the moment, if you're abiding in awareness and you can see the memory or the content that it's about, you might have a better chance of sort of seeing through it. But if all you're getting is a reaction, like you're just angry or you're really afraid, you can see how that might fool you into not being able to get to the gist of it, like the memory, because it doesn't show itself like right then. So you have to do a little inquiry or something to see what that is.
Yes. This reminds me, somebody showed me once in a somatic psychotherapy, talk about the iceberg, you know, there's the iceberg, but then I got a photo that was really an iceberg, and it was amazing to see. I'll pull it out here to see what's really happening. The idea is that what's above the water is just more like the mental content, but there's 90% below the water with all this uneasiness and yuckiness and triggers and mysterious things. So here.
Oh, yeah, that represents it well. Especially once you start doing these kinds of practice, that might not be obvious when you first start a practice of presence, but it's very obvious the more you go into that's the body, like you say, is
Yes. So also I like this, and I found it useful that, you know, usually when we hear self-inquiry or doing inquiry, especially for people on a spiritual path, this is connected to Ramana, non-dual, direct path, to look into the perceiver. Okay, there are thoughts, feelings, this or that, but what is aware of this? What is hearing? What is the knower of the experience? And, you know, the instruction was not as a mind, but to look into that. And I know there's part in your approach, you do some of that too when you do the unfindable inquiry, or try to see who is suffering? Me. Who is unworthy? Oh, me. Can you find it? And then we are not going to find it. We are going to find some image or a memory or a sensation or something. So this, you are going with along this Ramana inquiry. But the Kilab inquiry seems primarily kind of ego inquiry, looking and exploring thoroughly the false sense of self.
So it definitely includes the awareness piece, and so when we train people, we talk about the balance between rest and inquiry, or rest and somatic work, because it's definitely a part of it. This is a non-dual approach in the sense that awareness is the foundation of everything. And we talk about that constantly in the training. And I've talked a lot about it. So what I'm just doing is counterbalancing all that. This is me coming and saying, this is the other side of the coin, you know, that I didn't cover before. And so when it comes to inquiry, like you say, for me, it needs to be an integrated balance. If someone is coming to me and they're just into that, be here now, dismiss that thought, be here now, then what I feel like what I can do is I can show them to go deeper with inquiry and not just too much of that. But then if somebody comes with me when they're just processing like a busy mind, seeking, we can bring in the talk of restful awareness to kind of balance that out. And you picked up on that too, just the need for integrated balance.
Yes. And depending, there are some people that are just sucked in the washing machine. Their seeming consciousness is sucked in a washing machine. So there might be necessary to not go into processing the pains right now and kind of discover that there is presence and something is aware yet unaffected, and just mindfulness. So and I'm sure you do the same, to adjust to who is in front of us. And
also awareness is always here for me. So in my life now, talking about or making that a huge deal is not going to be that helpful for me at this point. So that's naturally why I've started to explore the other side of it. It's like it frees you up in a way. It's like once you're abiding, it's like, okay, that's okay. I got that part.
Yeah,
Now I need to deal with this other thing here that,
yeah,
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 that's how it works for me.
yeah. Even in a non-dual approach, other teachers, although they don't go so into the story, there is this term of post-awakening sadhana, like
Mm,
awakening being the discovering of our true nature.
mhm,
But then there are years and years of sense of contraction in the mind, in the body,
mm,
energetics. So now the job is to, okay, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm this presence. But then to have all this come up, some people do this in various physical exercises or yogic stuff or in the presence of the teacher. So that I have seen this, but I find it very surgical and efficient what you discovered that we won't really have time to tackle today, but this amazing uh, the the boomerang inquiry, the reverse inquiry, the utility inquiry, all of those are really meant to, like to say, to stir the subconscious quails out of the bushes.
hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just occurs to me to talk about so people can understand it. It's like shame and addiction for me. See if I could put this into words. It's like, so through the whole time when I was acting out that sexual thing and the shame was there, the awareness was there
Mm.
throughout the whole thing, but there was just something that wasn't being seen. That's the whole
Mhm.
thing. So I don't know if this helps people, but like in that moment where you know that there's this addiction, this shame happening, can you stop and ask a few questions that are skillful enough to literally pull up what you're already believing? You
Mhm.
already believe that you have to
Mhm.
hide, for
Mhm.
example, but you're not awake to it in that moment. And that to me is proof enough that awareness is not enough here. It's just something like that. Because I went for years, and I assume many people do, of not being able to access that shame. Like you know that there's
Mhm.
shame and you know your
Mhm.
behavior does it, but you can't make it conscious until you do something more than just resting as awareness or meditating, something more, whether
Yes.
it's
Yes.
therapy or somatic work or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now the problem is people do regular therapy. I think regular therapy, just talking, uh, that it will bring some alleviation and some feeling of. At the same time, that's not going to shred the conditioning, as you put it, to really deprogram and to see that those beliefs are actually not me and not true. So it's really important to not just process psychologically only, but and as you do it like one thought at a time. This, if you can talk about the necessity to, okay, watch the thought and watch it dissolve in front of you
Hmm.
and see if there is another thought, and kind of come back to, yeah, I'll let you do that.
Yeah. Well, I discovered it during the worst of the chronic pain when I started to recognize there was anger, repression. And so I started to play around with different ways I was relating to this information coming up. And I noticed that when the information would come up and I would just kind of witness through it fairly quickly, just like that, it's like it didn't land as hard. It's like
Mhm,
and it felt somewhat like repression, frankly.
mhm,
It felt like it was not repression, but it was like that's kind of like what repression is that there's a thought there and you just try to turn
mhm,
away from that one, turn away.
mhm,
So I thought, well, what is the opposite of repression? And then I would bring up, excuse my language, about being angry,
mhm.
and then I would stay with that one thought and then just like bathe it in awareness, welcome it, like make friends with it. And then that would actually and doing that and then allowing it to fully fall away felt like the opposite of repression, and it had much more of effect in the body that way than just witnessing, like to try to get to the
Yeah,
finish line, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's interesting. Like I've been using your with some addictions going on, and I was tackling the preoccupation as you talk about. Oh, I have no interest to smoke this at all, and then do the opposite. I can smoke this whenever I want, and
Mhm.
so what was interesting is that I would do some of these inquiries, and they will be initially quiet. There will be nothing, peaceful, nothing. And then it's almost like a drip on the faucet. Some thought says, it comforts me.
Yeah.
I'll be like, So then again, to kind of, okay, it comforts me. And then what? Then it came. So, oh, I like it. Yeah. So it's interesting. If I had stopped, I'll be okay. That's good. And actually,
Yeah.
I have clients that they haven't quite developed. They haven't enough practice with these inquiries that you developed, and when they do it alone, nothing happens or something. But it's interesting. You need to wait, and it's good to do it with someone first.
Yes. Yeah. At first it is, because unless you intuitively know, for example, that preoccupation is not just a craving, but it's also that line that says I shouldn't, or I need to manage it. Like, doing it with someone would just help you see that. And then you could go do it on your own. But until someone guides you through it, you may not see the full extent of your story, that you have to quit and that you stop, and then you may not see how that's actually strengthening the craving until someone. So just to see those. The other benefit is like, okay, once we get past preoccupation, we've got to deal with the somatic drivers, the deeper stuff. And you can imagine, well, you don't have to imagine, as a therapist, it's nice to have someone there, like a therapist or someone, because if that does come up, that they they can hold the space and skillfully help you through it, right? And that's hard on your own sometimes, like when on trauma, and also just on addiction, because we get this threshold. It feels like there's this place, the point of no return, where we're going to use something, like, I don't know if that feeling happens. And when that threshold is happening in our own experience, it takes a lot of awareness to be able to stop in the middle of that and actually look at that, because the tendency would just be to follow the habit from that point forward. So having somebody there to show you how to do it, is helpful for a while. But then after a while, you want to be able to do it on your own, because you can't always have somebody there, and life happens all the time, not just when you're
I love this approach on addiction, because usually addiction is this stigma, moralizing. I'm bad, I'm fucked up, I'm something wrong with me. Although even modern psychology went beyond that. But what I really love about your approach is that not to tackle the actual addiction directly for willpower, and but actually to bring full awareness to the whole file of addiction, and addiction being nothing but some innocent, legitimate way to alleviate some unpleasant feeling state, So to use addiction as a portal, actually, the way people come to me and say, hey, you can keep using, of course, unless it's really bad drugs, but and use that as a portal to access their unresolved issues and traumas and deficiencies. And it actually does work. And in my case, with other people, just shining a lot of awareness on this and the utility and the this and the that allows for some effortless, natural decrease of desire. And sometimes I was like, you know what? I'm throwing this, whatever.
Did you do that?
Yeah, I did that. Yeah. I need to have some sessions with you are coming up soon. I have some that I need some, more specialized.
Well, I think you mentioned it, is like, when the compulsivity comes down by looking at all these areas, it feels like there's then finally, I don't know if we can say real choice, but it feels like a choice then. It's like, oh, I could eat the pie, or I could also not. So if I made the decision, the easier to make in that moment than when you're fully in compulsion.
A number of sobriety days, although that's wonderful and should be honored and celebrated, respected, and I totally honor 12-step as a spiritual path. It seems like you are going deeper than that, not just sobriety, but you want real peace, not like sober, unhappy person.
Yes, something more than just certainly abstinence, or white knuckling, for sure. But the other thing about the what I like about our model of recovery for those who are ready is that we're actually recovering in a way from all of our belief systems that drive it too.
Yes.
Like it's not just that our traumas and stuff, but there are things that we believe. For example, like people who believe, I understand the addict identity serves a purpose for certain people, but at a certain point, that belief or some of the beliefs around recovery will actually can act as drivers. You know, they
Yes.
turn into deficiency stories. So it's what it feels like. It's not just recovering from drugs and alcohol, but from all
Yeah.
these paradigms that everybody is hooked on. They're hooked on paradigms and belief systems. And so I like that part of it too. It's not just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, there are so many things I would like to go into, but maybe we can have some further interviews if, inshallah, if God allows, and we can tackle this. I think I will kind of stop it here. But at the same time, I want to, there are any people that are therapists or somatic therapists or any people working with people's subconscious, uh, I warmly recommending you, and Scott hasn't paid me, so it's just like open-hearted, enthusiastic invitation. Scott is doing also some trainings to train facilitators, and actually I can't take clients, but I'm like, okay, I want to refer them to somebody who's not just doing talk therapy. I refer them to Scott or to people trained by Scott. And I encourage any practitioner and therapist to check out, the videos and also the programs that Scott and Dan are doing together. If you can speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we're training people regularly. So Dan and I, we're co-developers. We'll train people in one-on-one trainings. We're the only two that do it. And then we also have group training and mentorship programs. So mentorship programs are training plus. So you spend a good number of weeks and even months learning how to facilitate it on your own, learning how to use this work on your own, and a little bit of peer support. And then at the end, you can get into training as part of that and become certified. So all that's there, but I wanted to say that we are planning to train a group of therapists this fall. If any of your folks out there want to join that, some therapists from Australia and maybe a few here, going to be a small group. So if you're interested in that, email us at killerbeecenter@gmail.com.
Yeah, good to know. And I will put in this video, I'll put your website and the contact information. Yeah, and my intention was to connect with you, talk a little bit on a zoomed out perspective, but that would be wonderful to actually go into each one of your tools and see how they work and why they work. And actually,
love to do that.
Yeah, and actually, I studied this methodology. Was started 30 years ago by someone who then developed it with some other people, and now it became cutting edge. Is Hakomi, mindfulness-based somatic psychotherapy. So I can see that what you're doing is fully applying those principles and actually going further,
Yeah.
And I like also that it's even, you can process with someone, but then you can self-process. It's portable, your work.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, because that helps that people can become less dependent, even though we need therapists and teachers eventually to let go of some of the dependence and get our power back here, own our own power, instead of always relying on others. Yeah.
Yes. And I love how you were saying, and I discovered it myself and others, often that heroic, strong commitment of pursuing enlightenment, although it's noble and wonderful and maybe comes from past lives and whatever, but there's also what seems to drive it is that it feels that there's something not quite right now, so it comes from trying to escape something. And that which is trying to escape something is not going to arrive ever at the peace,
Right.
So I love that I find someone that like yourself to It makes sense to me.
Yeah. Well, also just on the deficiency story, where people come with a strong seeking of enlightenment, if we just kind of do inquiry on the deficiency story, when they start to see through that, they also then the seeking goes away, because it seems like the deficiency story is, I can't say it's everything because there's a lot of pain to people, but it seems to be a big part. It's almost like the seeking of enlightenment or self-improvement as a time-based thing. It is centrally connected to the deficient story, because again, as soon as people come to me and they'll say, well, enlighten me, like make me enlightened, I'll say, well, no, but what we can do is challenge directly the deficiency story that's here. Let's work with that. And then as a byproduct, then at the end of the session or later on, I'll say, so don't you still want to seek enlightenment? They'll be like, I'm not sure, or no, or something. See, so that's how closely related they seem to be.
Yeah, and these people in the West, in the East, they talk about, oh, the separate self, the ego, the ignorance, the me feeling, all that. But the core of it, that there's nothing that has more like stickier me feeling as a personal separate me than the deficiency story me or the trauma me. So it's like, well, why would I go into psychological work because non-duality is so much higher and I don't need this because I'm already that? Yeah, but that's bullshit. I'm sorry
I know, right?
to say that. Because the strongest sense of separation in the body, those feelings, they are coming from unresolved pain.
Yeah, I was talking to a gentleman one day. It was on social media. We were in a chat room, and he had come into the chat room saying all the right non-dual things. He was saying, all, I'm already oneness. There's no, just that kind of thing. And then someone, may have been me actually, said, but how? I said, how are you? But how are you doing? And he didn't. We went back to the non-dual thing for a while, the bigger thing. But I said, no. I really want to know how Joe is doing. And he said, oh, I hate myself and I'm suicidal a lot. So it's like, okay, well, can we talk about that instead of your oneness? Right.
Yeah. It's hard to stop with you, Scott. I'll say one more little story here. You were saying that sometimes you have people that come from a non-dual satsang, but somehow that satsang circle is not trauma informed. And then the teacher, basically not the teacher, it's not his fault, but due to the presence in the room and the energy or whatever, stuff comes up, however, the environment, the spiritual environment is not trauma informed. And then actually the teacher may say, hey, there's nothing wrong with me and this or that. I must say that it happened to me with wonderful teachers that I still follow and respect, and they are still helpful, but I could see the limitation of it. I would have a pattern that, although I feel pretty good and I understand a lot about too many things, but there's some pattern that plays out in relationship, and it's like keeps happening. So I go to this teacher, and I know that I'm not that, and I know that but I would say, but there's this thing that, and then this person, although I love and respect and will continue to follow, it says, hey, there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. And I was like, I know.
It wasn't the right thing to say right then.
That's it's no useful. This I know, but there's no useful. And actually, there is some files there with mommy and this and that are going to keep being there unless I tackle them. Somatic therapy, psychedelic journeys, whatever, in a skilled container.
And you know what? I don't even think that most of those teachers have any ill intent or all. I don't think they're aiming to do that. And so when I talk about other teachers, sometimes people misread what I'm doing. It's like, it's not jealousy or anger. It's simply, can we talk about limitations? Because we have limitations here. And if you can just recognize your limitation, that would be helpful as a word to all teachers, is know that you cannot help everybody in every situation. So we've learned how to refer out, for example, to therapists on certain things that we can't handle. We haven't learned how to do it yet. And I think if just teachers would just have that more of that attitude that they're not the be all end all of everything,
Yeah.
and that there's an entire interconnected world that people can find useful resources, then I think everybody's going to be healthier out of that. I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, Scott. So thank you for your time, and
Yep.
hope to connect with you soon and keep developing this. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.